Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to Jurassic Magic, and in today's topic, I want to discuss with you something that I've noticed recently in the Magic the Gathering community, and that is the saying, play more removal. The reason why I bring this up is because recently I made a meme about Iron Giant hating Drannith Magistrate because you couldn't cast your commander, and let me tell you, the floodgates opened. There were a lot of comments that kind of accumulated to the same saying, just play more removal. Now, don't get me wrong, I do believe that removal is important in the game, and trust me, I do play a lot of removal in my own commander decks. However, in today's video, I just wanted to share with you why that statement of play more removal might be hindering the game, and it might not be even the solution many people think it is, because it could actually be hurting commander more than it is helping. And honestly, it's kind of become a meme at this point. Somebody complains about a card, you just follow up with just run more removal. Can't play your commander because of Drannith Magistrate? Just play more removal. Your opponent combos off? Well, guess what? You should have played more removal. And by that same logic, if you run 30 to 40 removal spells, all your problems will go away and world peace will be attained in your commander game. But of course, that's probably not the case, because most likely you'll turn into the player nobody really wants to play with because all you're really doing is playing removal spells. But here's the thing, saying just play more removal oversimplifies a complex game, especially in commander where you're playing against 3 different people, especially one considering it dismisses important conversations about card design, playstyle diversity, power levels, and the actual experience of playing commander. So let's break this down just a little bit more. Why doesn't removal just fix everything? Well, for one, you are outnumbered in a commander game. There's 3 other opponents that want to win the game too, and because it is multiplayer, you just can't remove everything on the battlefield. 1-for-1 trades don't really scale well when you got 3 other opponents pumping out value, especially considering a lot of creatures nowadays have great ETBs where they already get the value of the card, and removing it doesn't really do anything. And that kind of leads me to my next point, and that's the fact that timing is everything. This is probably the biggest issue to the argument of just play more removal.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Because what kind of removal are you adding into your deck that would respond to the situation perfectly? Sometimes you don't have the right type of mana to cast the spell, or even the right color. And probably in more situations than not, the removal spell you need is probably in your library or even in your graveyard that you already used. Because all it takes is just 1 turn cycle before the game warps around a busted card, and you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs, wishing you had that removal. Besides that point, this is a social game after all. Commander is one of the best ways to play Magic in my opinion, and that's why politics and perception matter is highly important, because there are some situations where you can remove the problem, but sometimes you don't really want to, because you don't want to draw heat, or someone else will promise they would, or you're saving it for something worse. Let's just say hypothetically somebody is playing a Gishath deck, and you just wait for the chance to remove it when it enters the battlefield. But if that player played a lot of other spells to advance their game plan and you're sitting there just waiting to remove that Gishath, that's what you're hyper focusing on only. You may have missed opportunities to advance your own game plan instead of worrying about removing another threat. So those were just some of the limitations of removal. Of course, removal can be very good in specific situations, but it's not the end all be all on the conversation. I think the bigger problem that we are facing today as commander players, and really in any format, is the fact that everything is built for commander. Whether you like it or not, commander is the most popular format in Magic the Gathering, and that tends to lead to power creep. And one specific example everybody knows is Nadu Winged Wisdom. That was made for commander even though it was a modern card, and turns out it had to be banned in multiple formats just because how good and also how annoying it was to deal with. Even though you could say let's just play more removal so that we can remove the Nadu, they could easily just put a card into their hand and get a counter spell ready to counter that removal spell. Nadu is just one of the many examples of power creep and design philosophy gone wrong. Another prime example would be Orcish Bowmasters. A lot of people think, well, I'm not going to remove that one because it's too small and I'd rather save my removal spell for another bigger threat, but turns out Orcish Bowmaster could be the bigger threat that pings down a lot of your mana dorks, or even pings down everybody on the table depending on if they throw a wheel out. It might already be too late to use your removal spell because you could be tapped out, or if somebody uses a counter spell against your removal, or again, you may not even have the removal in your hand. Since commander is a singleton format, the chances of you having a removal spell in your hand, even if you throw in 20 of them, is about 20% of the time, which can be good odds.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
But at the same time, there could be other cards that you could be running into and not the removal spell you need at that specific moment. So there's the option run more removal or try to advance your own game plan and win the game, or even just to have fun. And again, I don't want to go down the train of you shouldn't just run removal at all. That's not the case. In fact, running removal is very important in games. Again, I'm just saying Commander is a lot more complicated than just saying just run more removal. Cards that are designed today often push to absurd power levels. They're cheap, efficient, and shut down major aspects of the game. Some symmetrical and most aren't. Drannith Magistrate, I'm going to go back to this example, does stop you from casting your commander, and in most cases that is what you're building your deck around. And I know a lot of people say you shouldn't build your deck around your commander, and I kind of disagree with that sentiment, because if you built a commander deck, most likely in some situations you built around a legendary that you love a lot. So in all reality, what should we be talking about when considering the phrase just run more removal? What if in just saying that phrase we could ask some better questions? Is this card good for casual play? Does this create interesting decisions at the table or just shuts people down? Is my deck too focused on answers instead of synergy? And are we aligned on power level expectations? Commander is about social play, expression, big plays, and wild comebacks. Of course, it depends on what kind of power level you're playing, but in most situations, those are some of the things usually most people consider when playing Commander. When one player decides to run a bunch of oppressive cards, and the only answer is to yell, well, just run more removal, we're putting a burden on the table instead of questioning the card's place in the game. So yeah, don't get me wrong, removal is good, you should run it, you should plan for threats. However, the catchphrase just play removal isn't a really good argument for deck building philosophy, at least in my opinion. But now I would like to hear from you in the comments. Of course, my philosophy is not going to be the end all be all in the conversation. Of course, there's a lot of different viewpoints that I haven't explored or may even considered, because this is just how I've been playing Commander and how it's worked for me personally. And I'm not just a big fan of the hypothetical situation, well, if you had a lightning bolt in your hand, you could have just hit the Drannith Magistrate and it would be all over, because most cases you won't even have the lightning bolt in your hand, or maybe even some other removal spells. I know I keep going back to the Drannith Magistrate example, but I feel like that personally personifies this whole argument, because Drannith Magistrate is basically the anti-commander card in the commander format. So again, I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, if you can, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.